Well, there are just 2 weeks left in our summer worship series with congregation members sharing stories of transformation. Today, Stephanie Hubbard is our preacher. Stephanie's a music therapist in the St. Paul Public Schools and led our early childhood ministries for many years. Though she stopped working here, she and her husband Will decided to join the church and raise baby Thea, who's not a baby anymore. She's a full-on entering toddlerhood. So we are so glad that you are continuing to be with us as a family. As a music therapist, Stephanie helps children give voice to their feelings through music. The Psalms, written as poems or music, give voice to many feelings as well: joy and hope, gratitude, fear, anger, worry, lament. Stephanie chose this psalm for the way it gives voice to her experiences of coming face to face with God. Protect me, O God, for in you I take refuge. I say to the Lord, you are my Lord. I have no good apart from you. As for the holy ones in the land, they are the noble in whom is all my delight. The Lord is my chosen portion and my cup. You hold my lot. The boundary lines have fallen for me in pleasant places. I have a goodly heritage. I bless the Lord who gives me counsel. In the night also my heart instructs me. I keep the Lord always before me. Because God is at my right hand, I shall not be moved. Therefore my heart is glad and my soul rejoices. My body also rests secure. For you do not give me up to Sheol, or let your faithful see the pit. You show me the path of life. In your presence there is fullness of joy. In your right hand are pleasures forevermore. May these words be to us our light and our life. Thanks be to God.
Good morning. In preparing for today and looking more deeply into today's scripture, I learned that this particular psalm comes from a group of psalms written by David called Miktam Psalms. These psalms are sometimes referred to as golden, precious, or covered. It has been suggested that many Miktam Psalms were written during times of peril, and some believe that David wrote them in secret or as silent psalms during these times of crisis. This is such a beautiful connection to the story I have the privilege of sharing with you today. This story is also golden, precious, and yet so often covered or held secret. My hope is that in sharing it, we will experience God together without the covering of shame, societal expectation, or fear. In late October 2017, I had the joy of announcing my pregnancy to my family. I wasn't due until June, but the tradition and expectation had been to announce early in my family, celebrating together and grieving together if we experienced a loss. My family often discussed the prevalence of miscarriage, the societal expectation of not announcing until that pivotal 12-week mark, and the double-edged sword of advanced medicine, which can give us hope and at the same time cause lengthened periods of anxiety and grief. I hadn't had time to announce my first pregnancy except to my mom and a couple of close friends. It turned out to be what medicine calls a chemical pregnancy, and it's likely I wouldn't have known about it if I wasn't eagerly anticipating it and had the technology to test early. My family was woke about pregnancy and pregnancy loss, and I was ready to share. In fact, by Holman standards, I had already waited far too long to share. Will and I were excited, and we settled on how and when we were going to do it. We shared with Will's mom and grandma by giving them a home-decorated dog bowl for our Siberian Husky Sky, inscribed Big Sister. We also gave them tiny husky-shaped baby booties. We shared with my family and some of my closest cousins at a family Halloween party with a homemade onesie that read, "Number 5, Baby Hubbard's rightful place in his or her lineage of cousins." I also shared about my miscarriage, and my sisters-in-law and cousin shared their pregnancy loss and infertility stories. Both my sisters-in-law were also pregnant, and we were due in April, May, and June, respectively. We were so excited for the possibilities of the cousin trio, which we had sort of planned and very much hoped for. I remember grimacing with joy at the chaos that would soon be upon us with 3 newborns and 2 two-year-olds underfoot. It was a joyous evening. The next day, my sister-in-law Christy shared that she had to go into the hospital. She was 16 and a half weeks pregnant, and something was wrong. I hoped that things were okay and that extra caution would give us security. But that evening, we learned that Christy was so far progressed in labor that she would need to deliver. My tiny little 16 and a half week old niece came far earlier than any of us had imagined. My parents went to visit and held Harper's tiny little body and kissed her tiny hands and feet. Christy was so strong. She advocated for herself throughout the entire process and took beautiful pictures of baby Harper and gave us all updates. Stillbirth was not a part of our family's pregnancy loss comfort zone. This was new territory. I remember thinking, what do I say? What can I do? How can I be supportive with a baby growing and developing in my own belly? Why did this happen? How did this happen? Could we have saved Harper? I spent a lot of the 7 months after Harper's death trying to navigate my grief and support my family while making space for my joy and quelling my anxiety. I remember telling myself over and over to be present and to make space for everything that came up. It felt wrong that both a joy and also a grief that were so overwhelming and so new could seemingly coexist inside of me. And yet it felt wrong to ignore that that was exactly where I was. I was hyper-acutely aware of pregnancy loss and infertility stories. I didn't want to cause pain or harm to anyone with the joy of my own story, and I struggled with how to express my feelings of excitement to even my closest family and friends. At the same time, I was grieving the loss of my niece and her relationships with her cousins and all of us. I felt the pangs of not knowing the extent of the deep hurt my parents must be feeling. And I was angry about the trauma my brother and sister-in-law had experienced. Every little pregnancy milestone was mixed with grief, joy, anger, guilt, and an almost laser-like focus on how to get to the next necessary milestone. There were so many reminders of Harper's loss that seemed to come up out of the blue in the least expected of places. My thoughts cycled. I can't complain. I shouldn't complain. I can't be too happy. I shouldn't be too happy. I can't plan too far ahead. I shouldn't plan too far ahead. And why am I so worried? Am I worried enough? And why do I even get to worry when so many people I know have lost babies or cannot have them? This expletive sucks. What the actual expletive? Between the guilt, grief, and comparisons, it would be easy to say that I lost myself in all of this. But I believe that Harper actually pushed me to find myself, to claim my own story and hold that deep grief and that overwhelming joy with care, to lean on my support systems in order to experience the depth and breadth of what I was going through, and to practice authentic vulnerability and receive support. To start to be comfortable with experiencing feelings so big I couldn't name or explain them. And to stop trying to find an explanation at all. Thea's due date was June 15th. I remember being okay with her seemingly late arrival, but also anxious for her to arrive before I needed to be induced. I was lucky to have an incredible OB who knew about Harper and who asked about how I was doing with her loss at every visit. I remember at my final visit telling her I was afraid. I was afraid that I wouldn't be able to have the relationship I wanted with Thea because I was still grieving Harper's loss. My doctor empathized, then told me she knew I would be able to, that assuming all biochemical processes were functioning as normal, it was almost biologically impossible for me to ignore my deep and one-of-a-kind relationship with my newborn. That our bodies release all sorts of love and connection hormones that give us a sense of ownership of our stories. It was exactly what I needed to hear in that moment. On June 20th, my contractions started around 2 a.m. I dutifully counted and tracked them while both packing my hospital bag and also finishing my birth plan. When it was time, we went to the hospital. That was around 7 a.m. Then we were sent home, and then we came right back. Once I was admitted, I ended up with an amazing nurse who was trauma-informed, and I told her about Harper's story. She supported me every step of the way, and she was with me from when I got admitted until when I started pushing. She came back to visit Thea after she was born. She was exactly the right person to support me in labor. While laboring during an especially intense round of contractions, I remember marveling at the amazing work Thea was doing and the work we were doing together. Through the pain and my inability to be anything other than raw and vulnerable, something struck me. This is my baby, I heard my heart say. This is my baby, I thought. This is my baby, and I believed it. I used that mantra, my God-given counsel in the night, this is my baby, to get through several of the next contractions. I used the mantra, I'll help you, to get through the contractions after that. It felt like every contraction was bringing me closer to my baby, closer to my story, and I felt the strength grow within me as I claimed it bit by bit. I was finally ready to claim and to foster a nurturing, love-filled relationship with my child. At 11:58 p.m., Thea was born. I was so incredibly proud of her. I was proud of the work she had done, the work we had done together, and the independent spirit I already saw inside of her at not even an hour old. I knew she was mine. I knew that our story was special, that I could hold on to my own story, that I had enough space for grief and joy, anger and sadness, and newness. That I could grieve the loss of my niece and what could have been for her and our family were she here, and build a strong, powerful bond with my daughter. That I could have gratitude for my child and struggle as a parent. That despite what Instagram said, I could hold on to 2 or more truths, 2 or more emotions, and 2 or more stories at once. I realize now that I was face to face with God that entire time. God spoke to me through my OB. God worked in and through my labor and delivery nurse. God laid upon my heart that mid-labor mantra that encouraged me to claim my story. God was in the oxytocin my body created that allowed me to develop a strong connection with my child. And God works in ways that I didn't know. And God continues to work in and through these stories. Thea and Harper's stories will always have a connection. Harper will always be a part of our family's story. We have physical reminders. A special necklace Christy wears with Harper's footprint on it. A grandmother's necklace with her birthstone that my mom wears. A plaque that says, "Hooked on Papa," that has Harper's tiny little handprint alongside the handprints of all of her cousins, each made into a type of fish. Thea's name, Thea Harper Rose Hubbard. All of these things and more are special ways we have found to honor Harper and acknowledge that her legacy is deep. I believe that Harper has taught me a great deal. I can't be sure, but knowing myself and my need to plan and to have a plan, I don't know if I would have stepped into motherhood with the same attitude of grace and surrender I so quickly learned to embody as a new parent. I'm also learning how to hold both joy and grief, especially when I am reminded of what could have been, and especially when I don't have an explanation. I'm learning how to seek support and to share my pain. I am also learning how to share my joy. I'm learning how to teach my child and my siblings' children to remember loved ones and to talk about them. To honor their stories even when tears come. Perhaps especially when tears come. I'm learning how to show the children I teach and the children I'm related to that life is full of deep emotions that can coexist and that our stories intersect. And at the same time, our stories are uniquely ours. While I don't think we had to lose Harper for me to learn and wrestle with these things, I do believe that her legacy is deep and far-reaching. I believe that Harper has taught and continues to teach myself and my family and many others. I do not believe that everything happens for a reason or that God needed Harper for a greater purpose. I refuse to simplify her story in that way, and I believe that thinking diminishes and downplays her story and the stories of everyone who lost her. I do believe in continuing to share Harper's story and continuing to claim my own story as it connects to hers. Because I believe that in that vulnerability, there is God. As David knew so well, God is with us in times of peril and in golden times. God is with us in pregnancy loss and stillbirth and infertility and the what could have beens. God is with us in conception and pregnancy and labor and delivery, whatever that looks like. God is with us in parenthood and family life and the work that we do to make the world better for all of God's children. In that deep grief, in that overwhelming joy, in that confusion and anger and anxiety, there is God. I believe that God grieves with us, that God rejoices with us, that God wants to be with us, to counsel us, and show us ways to be present and to surrender when we try to pick up the pieces after earth-shattering and story-changing experiences.